Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Religion and Remission Podcast. I am your host, Mary Burkhart, and today I have joining me someone who has become very special to me. We met on Twitter, funnily enough, and she approached me about speaking at one of her conferences, and her name is Janice Selbie, and she is someone that I want everyone to know about. So let me give you her quick bio. She was born and raised in a charismatic Christian home. In her 30s, she became ultraconservative, donning a head covering, homeschooling her children, and rejecting any vestiges of secular life. It wasn't until her 40s that Janice began experiencing doubts about her deeply held faith. Her passion is to help others who are experiencing the multiple significant losses associated with religious and deconversion and religious trauma syndrome. Janice is the founder of the Divorcing Religion Podcast, Court or Conference on Religious Trauma, and Shameless Sexuality Conference. Welcome, Janice, and thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so excited.
You. Yes, it's really delightful to be here and to have the chance to be your guest.
Yes, because I was just on your podcast not too long ago, and that was exciting as well. I was very happy. It's different being on the other side of it, though. You know, you have to worry about all the technicalities.
Yes.
So let's just start off again. Like I gave the broad stroke, but, you know, just tell us a little bit more about who you are, where you come from, and how you made your way to the atheist lifestyle.
Sure. Well, I'm Canadian. I grew up in British Columbia, and I was born into a Pentecostal home. So when I grew up, my parents would speak in tongues and anoint us with oil if we were sick. And my dad is a big player in the story of my trauma and my religious trauma because he is a narcissist and a fundamentalist. So when you combine those two traits in the man of the family, the head of the family, it just can make for a very unpleasant upbringing. And so he was very volatile, emotionally volatile and immature, and the rest of us just kind of cowered in fear. And so I didn't really doubt Christianity. I grew up going to church, kind of had a backsliding time. Some of your listeners might be familiar with that backsliding time in my late teens and very early 20s, and I joined a rock band, and I, just did all sorts of stuff. Had a pretty great time, but I could never shake the guilt that I felt all the time. So then I had my back to Jesus moment in my mid-20s, and back to the Pentecostal church. My pastor introduced me to the man that I would marry, and then that fellow wanted to become a pastor. So then we left and moved to a prairie province in Canada, to a tiny town. And we were there for several years when he was in Bible college. And it was while we were there that I encountered these women who dressed so strangely. They were always, very modestly dressed in their long skirts and dresses. And they always had their hair up and covered. You would never see their hair. No makeup, of course, no jewelry, nothing. And I said to my then husband, I didn't know we had Amish people here in Canada. And he said, no, they're not Amish. They're some kind of brand of Mennonite. And they're dressing actually according to the Bible. In the New Testament, it tells women how to dress. And I had always just kind of skipped over that part before, but I was so intrigued by these women that I went home and dug out the Bible and the concordance and the lexicon and all these important big Bible books to help me rightly divide the word of truth.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, it's true. It is in there. And no one gave permission in the rest of the Bible for women not to dress this way. So I love following rules because in my family with my unpredictable dad, if we would follow the rules, things could go better for us. Mm-hmm. So I was a huge rule follower. Very important to me. And so I found more rules. So I was so excited, so happy about this, and immediately got rid of my jewelry and my pants and anything like that. Just only wore skirts and dresses, and started wearing head covering, and didn't cut my daughter's hair. I had 2 little girls at the time, and they had to all of a sudden start wearing skirts and dresses all the time too. started attending the Mennonite church that was just outside of town, and their brand of Mennonite was called Haldeman Mennonites. And so they were kind of like a loose colony, maybe. So a bunch of farmers and, farmland. And it was really interesting. The church was so different from the Pentecostal church. The Pentecostal church was very exciting. But this church, I felt every time I walked in, it just felt very sacred and holy. It was so quiet, and the men sat on one side and the women sat on the other, and there was no instruments even in that church. There was just whoever was at the front. A man would have a pitch pipe he would blow into, and then we would just sing the hymns, and there wasn't even like harmonizing or anything, because that sort of thing, and which was so beautiful to me. I love singing and harmonizing, but no, that'll be, you're looking to gain attention for yourself. Mm-hmm. So we spent a lot of time with those folks, and the Bible college, the folks on the campus certainly thought I was going a little bit too far, because I was the only one on the campus who was dressing like that. But I wouldn't go up to other women and tell them, you should be dressing like this. That's just not in my nature to be doing that. I just felt I was doing what my Lord required of me. And so I really went down that rabbit hole, and then we moved away to another province, to an even smaller town, where my husband at the time was a pastor. He was hired on to become a pastor, and it was a really difficult time. He wasn't much of a shepherd. He's on the autism spectrum. We used to say Asperger's, but I don't think we use that term now. We say neurodivergent. But so that meant that he has a hard time, for him, understanding emotions and kind of speaking that language. And he just came to a church that he saw was dying, and he thought, okay, we got to get rid of everything, got to bring in huge speaker stacks and electric guitars and get rid of the piano. We got to try and bring in the young people. And the poor congregants, who were just elderly farmers, they just couldn't believe what was going on. They just wanted someone to bury them, really. Right. And so the board members would be so upset, and the congregants, and they couldn't talk to him. It wouldn't get through. So then I spent my time there putting out fires, emotionally. It was very challenging. And then my mother contacted me and told me that my parents were separating after 40 years. And so that was shocking, even though I was very glad that she was leaving my dad. It still was shocking. Yeah. And then one of the saddest pieces of the puzzle, I heard from the RCMP, who are our Royal Canadian Mounted Police, that my beloved young nephew had actually killed someone and was on the run. Mm-hmm. And so they were afraid he might be heading out to the prairies to seek refuge with us. And the police, of course, were saying, if he shows up, you don't have a choice. You have to turn him in. So it was really a jarring series of events that kept happening, and things just kept happening. And we ended up, he was caught, by the way. He didn't ever make it out to where we were. And my husband at the time ended up quitting, which was shocking. And we had to move to another place. And then our daughter was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, and we didn't have enough money to cover all of our bills and her necessary medical equipment. So then we also had bankruptcy. And this all happened in about 1 to 2 years. And, that was the last straw for me. She was only 10 years old, and I walked by her room and I saw her kneeling, and I knew she was praying, and I listened, and she was asking God to forgive whatever she had done, that he was making her pay, that he was punishing her. And I thought, that is it. If there is a God, I don't want anything to do with it. Not that God that would, inflict such a terrible thing on my child. But I didn't even have anyone that I could talk to, because I only had my church friends who would say, well, you're being chastised, or is there sin in your life, or you just need to pray harder. And my marriage was coming completely unraveled at that time. So I just felt really alone. Did struggle with suicidal thoughts and ideations, and because it just was such an overwhelming, I felt like I was sinking to the bottom of a pond, and there was no way out. And so thankfully I went to my doctor and told my doctor what was going on, and the doctor actually was a big help to me. But something in me had shifted. It's like I knew that I could never go back. I just didn't believe anymore. My beliefs were dissolving, but along with that, so was my entire identity and my worldview. It was like up was down now. Everything was topsy-turvy. And I tell people, it felt like I was in a gray dinghy on a gray ocean, in a gray fog. And so sometimes I might hear a bell ringing on a distant shore, but I couldn't tell where it was. I felt completely alone. Yeah. And I was watching an old movie one night, a World War II kind of movie. It was, I think it was even in black and white. And these fellows had escaped from the prisoner of war camp, and they were going through the jungle, and there were only a few of them, and then one got killed by a poisonous snake, and one starved to death, and one got shot. And finally there's just this one guy left, and he looks up at the moon, and he's cursing God. I don't even believe in you anymore. And the moonlight was just streaming in through my window, and tears were just rolling down my face, because I was like, yeah, I don't believe anymore either. But who am I now? Who am I if I don't believe? And I didn't know anybody else who'd been as devout and really loved Jesus the way that I loved Jesus, and who had walked away and had a successful, healthy life. I would sit in front of the computer. I didn't even know what to type in. I didn't know words like deconstruction or even deconversion. I just knew that something that was so central to my entire being was gone, and I could never put it back together. So it felt really difficult. My marriage did end, and I did give myself permission to start searching around in other groups. I spent a lot of time in the New Age camp, loved my time there. I could, look at psychics and astrology and all these things that were forbidden, and they seemed like so much fun until people tried to tell me that, they could channel aliens and stuff like that. I'm like, oh really? That's so disappointing.
Right.
Oh no, you got
me
magical
until
thinking.
you said that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so that was really disappointing as well. And then I had embarked on another romantic relationship after my marriage, when I was separated, and it was really interesting because we had always been very poor. We didn't have money when I was growing up. And then when I was married, we definitely didn't have any money. And this person that I was partnering with now had a lot of money, and I had never experienced that before. And they said to me, whatever you want, you can have, like, there's no limits. And so I took them up on that within reason. And I allowed myself to really experiment in pretty much every way you can imagine. There were substances, there were people, it was like my adolescence had returned to me, and it was like I had been a beach ball that was shoved under the water and held down for so long, and then you take your hands off and it's messy and it splashes everywhere. That's what it was like. I was having a pretty great time, but my children were my daughters were in their early teens and middle teens by then. And I'm sure it gave them whiplash, looking at mom go from one direction to the other. And so that is something through the years that I've really worked to repair with them, and just to make the very necessary apologies. I couldn't see it at the time, how what I was doing was harming them, was difficult for them. It did also give them the opportunity to see how much a person can change, and that they can let go of very restrictive beliefs.
Yes.
And then that was a few years ago. Now I went back to school. I became a registered professional counselor in Canada. And at that time, I still didn't even know about religious trauma. I was learning about trauma, and then I started identifying. I was like, that sounds like me. Oh, I've got that.
Familiar.
Oh, I've got that.
Yeah.
And so at first I saw, okay, it's family of origin trauma. But then really when I got down to the nitty gritty of it, so much of it had to do with my religious beliefs and being raised in a fundamentalist home. And so then I was trying to find out about religious trauma. I just didn't know the name for it. And eventually I found Dr. Marlene Winnell, and her organization is called Journey Free, and her book is called Leaving the Fold. In case any of your viewers are interested, Leaving the Fold is a really helpful book. And I connected with Marlene right away, just called her up and said, I need what you have. Like, what can I do? And she said, well, come to a retreat. So I went to some of her retreats, and by then I was starting to specialize in my practice, my private practice as a counselor, working with people recovering from religious trauma syndrome. And then I said to her one day, well, do we have any conferences about this? And she said, nope. And I said, idea. I've never done a conference before. I've never even attended a conference. So I'm the perfect person to put together a conference. And that's what I did.
Yes. And it turned out well, though.
It sure
is so
did.
Needed. It's so needed. Oh, man.
And we're getting set to have our third one, and you're going to be speaking at it.
Yes, I will be. And I'm totally excited about that. Nervous, but excited. You just always want to represent the community the right way, and so that's the only reason I say I'm nervous, but never get too comfortable when I'm talking to someone or people and trying to help them, find their way. So
people throw you curveballs.
They do. They really do. I just kind of wanted to pull a few things out of what you were saying. The first thing was when you mentioned you found the Mennonites, and they were, had rules that were so structured. Isn't it funny, right? How growing up, fundamentalists, especially, now you and I, we vibe here because I was Pentecostal apostolic, so
yes,
growing up that way, you are so happy when you find structure and rules. It's like, I know what to do. I know where to go. Tell me how to talk and walk. You don't really have to think for yourself. But a lot of religion does that. We get so comfortable with not having to do, not having to think, not having to figure it out, and that is the part of religion that's so toxic, especially when it comes to stripping away our identity, because we're so comfortable with letting other people guide us.
And I felt so exposed and so vulnerable as I was questioning whether or not there even was a God, because I had always viewed Jesus as my cosmic big brother. Like, if I could handle anything, with Jesus. And then I'm like, what? They're not even Jesus? What? I got to do it all on my own? What are you talking about? Do you know who I am? I don't know anything. So that part was sketchy.
The comforting part is that you were already doing it on your own.
Yeah.
You just didn't know it.
Every time I prayed, I heard myself.
That's right.
It's the truth. It's the truth. Yeah. And then people say, but, what about I prayed and then this thing happened? But what people aren't, considering is that when you're looking for an answer to a problem, you are really focusing on that. And so anytime you're at a bus stop or a mall or whatever, and you hear people talking, if they mention what you're looking for, you're going to pick up on it. So
yes. And it's so funny you say that, because Dr. Winnell at last year's court talked about how when you are subconsciously, looking for something, you kind of go towards that, and it's just kind of the I don't like to get to the woo, but the manifestation, self-fulfilling prophecy type thing. When you're searching for answers, whether or not that is your answer, what we typically do is we conflate, right? So I'm looking for a sign for this. And it's, you know, oh, yes, the wind is blowing to the left, you know, so that's my side, you know, so we.
I think there's also something that humans have called the reticular activating system. And it's like, if you get a green car, all of a sudden you're like noticing all the green cars that are driving by. Yes. Where do all those green cars come from? And it's a similar thing when we're talking about problem solving.
Yes. You figure you find your issue or what you're looking for and everything that you do.
It's everywhere.
And it's not the fact that it's just popping up. It's that it's been everywhere. We're just noticing it because now it's relevant to us.
Exactly.
And another thing you were talking about was your children and how, you know, you kind of that bouncy ball out of the water, and how you didn't realize what you were doing was hurting them. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was poignant, but it was also very important to what religion kind of does to us. Because as parents, we don't realize that we're hurting our children with religion either. So you had both ends of the spectrum where you didn't realize that you know, there was harm being caused to your daughters through religion. Now, you know, through you trying to find yourself.
Yeah, I actually remember. So I got tattoos. I grew dreadlocks. I was like trying to get
Wait a minute.
far
I
away.
need pictures, Janice. I need some. First of all, I need pictures and I need an album of when you were in a rock band. Okay, so you have to send me this stuff.
I've had quite an interesting life, and I remember I was standing on a corner waiting for the light to change, and I was with my daughter who was maybe 10 at the time, mm-hmm. and I had my dreadlocks, and I was wearing a real 1970s type getup, and some guy comes over to me and he says, "Hey, lady, you got a joint?" And my kid goes, "Yeah, right. This is my mom. And in the meantime, I've got a roach in my pocket." I'm like, "Nope, I cannot help you."
Sorry.
Of course, now it's all legal in Canada, so it doesn't matter anyway. But I'm happy to say now, my daughters also found their way out of religion. They never did buy in as heavily as I did. And their dad also has made his way out, and we remain wonderful friends. And I've just remarried. And so when we have a family event, my ex-husband comes, and of course my current husband is there, and everybody is just so kind and gets along beautifully. It really is the best case scenario. It's worked out really well.
Yeah, especially when you consider he was a pastor, and it could have went another way. You know, mm-hmm. That could have made co-parenting very difficult. But I'm glad that you guys were able to salvage your friendship through all of that.
Yeah, me too. It's important. He's important to me.
Yeah, of course. You guys spent a lot of time together.
Yeah, we were together for about 20 years, just under 20 years. And I really do feel sorry for him when I look back on it, because that was not what he signed up for, to have a wife who completely lost her mind and just was like, "I can't do this anymore." It's like I was ripping a mask off and showing that I was someone completely different. It had to be very shocking.
But, you know, I always use the analogy of the rope, you know, when I talk about deconstruction and religion and indoctrination. And so when we're born, you know, we're that one strand, that first strand of the rope. And then, you know, every time we have a new rule, when we go to church, every time we get a new lesson, every time there's a new scripture, it all starts to bind together, and you become so indoctrinated. And I always tell people, you can pull the wrong thread and unravel that rope completely. And it can be a very messy process. That's why it's important on your deconstruction journey to really understand that there's no book, right, that tells you how to do it. But there are better ways of going about things, you know. Maybe in your case, you know, being in a rock band was the best thing to do. You know, that was the way to go, growing dreads and having roaches in your pocket, you know. That was...
Oh, my God.
But you know, but there are better ways to approach it so that you kind of maintain that level of control and stability throughout, you know.
Yes.
It's okay to have a controlled explosion, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It's okay. I want to do something really crazy. Okay. Let's assess the risk and go for it, but
that's exactly right. The whole risk assessment idea, and people, when they recognize, oh my God, I don't believe anymore, they can want to run around and shout it and tell everybody. But anytime we're grappling with a new ideology or a new identity, taking it slow as far as making things public can be advisable. I mean, because there are other people for whom it will be the worst possible news when they find out that we no longer believe. They would rather hear that we died.
Yes.
Than that we are rejecting what they think as the truth. So, there's some finessing, some ways that we can do it that potentially will be a little bit easier. But people have to do it the way that it works for them to do it.
Exactly. And at the end of it all, you have to live the life that you're comfortable with. You have to make the decisions that you feel are best for you. And so I would never tell someone, hey, tiptoe around this. Right. If someone's just going to be unreasonable, it doesn't matter how long it takes. They're going to be unreasonable. Sometimes in some cases it's better to rip the Band-Aid off and, just kind of get it over with. But there are better ways, especially if, you're living with someone who is still religious or heavily indoctrinated. Mm-hmm. There are steps you can take to kind of work your way out of it.
Or if you're beholden to them financially, or if they provide childcare, we need to think through, why do we want to tell them? How do we want to tell them? What's the best way to do it? And we want to have some preparation, some contingency plans. Do I have a place to stay if this person becomes violent or this sort of thing? Do I have any money in the bank?
Tell some clients to have a police escort if it comes down to it. While you're moving out, because if this person or these people get violent, have the police standing by. They're less likely to do so, and you have a safe exit. You have to make sure that you are going to be safe and that you are going to be taken care of. And even if that means withholding the information for a little while, right? Don't compromise yourself for the sake of, some kind of vain pursuit of just I got to tell everybody. It's not worth that. It's not worth it.
And we're used to judging ourselves and to seeing the world in a very binary kind of way. And so we can tend to inflict that on ourselves. I'm not doing it right. I'm doing it the wrong way. There is no right and wrong way. You have to do it in the way that feels comfortable for you.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the questions that I definitely want to ask is, more about your trauma under religion. Was it just, I'm going to say it just, but was there anything more than the, I don't even want to say typical, because indoctrination is hardly ever typical, but the trauma of indoctrination as a child, we have what I would call kind of typical indoctrination stories, especially as a Pentecostal, because, the shouting, the running around the church, the laying on of the hands, and just, it's very, very intense. And I can remember being traumatized, but simultaneously wanting to participate.
Yes.
Because you want to be accepted, right? And you want to, these people that you love and trust so much, they're engaged in this, and you want to be a part of it. So
it's very hard to, sorry.
No, I was going to say, was that kind of similar?
Yes. So hell was something that I struggled with as far as indoctrination goes, but I didn't struggle with it for myself as much as for my children, because I felt fairly certain that there was no hell, but I was concerned if my unbelief would be attributed to my children, it could make them suffer. And that was very hard. And then the other thing that was really just heavy was existential angst. When I remember thinking, well, of course, there's no hell. But then when I started to think, oh my God, what if that means there's no heaven? what does that mean? Am I never going to see loved ones again? What? My mom is still alive. I don't want to be disconnected from her when she goes. And it was really heavy and really challenging. And so I did, I phoned my big brother, who is an atheist, and I said, I'm having such a hard time with this. And he's like, I know, I had a hard time with it too. And he recommended some videos for me, and they were really helpful. Patriarchy has been, I'm sure I'll be untangling that horrible thing until the time that I die, because it shows up in ways I don't even recognize it. And it'll take one of my daughters, my kids are in their 20s now, to say, Mom, no, that's not, it doesn't have to be that way, or he shouldn't have said that, or he didn't have that right. And I'm like, oh, you're right. That was not good. Or even maybe I'll say something and it's still kind of in that same vein of patriarchal thinking. And that's something that I have to work at regularly, reminding myself that I am strong. And I can do it. I've come so far already. Yeah. I can keep going. There's nothing that I can't do. I can get help from other people. There are resources. I can find ways to help myself and do the things that I really want to do. But it's easy to kind of fall back into that, oh, woe is me, and I can't do it, and I wish someone would just come along and do it all for me. But I don't want to go back to that.
No. And again, back to the rope analogy, there's always going to be a thread that needs to be removed.
It's true.
It's a lifelong process, right? Up until the point that you decide to walk away, that's your life. So it is a lifelong process to get indoctrinated and to stay indoctrinated and to, fill those beliefs and fuel those fantasies. It's going to take another lifetime to come out of it and to really unravel it. And, you might not finish before you get, before your clock runs out.
That's right.
But it's just, it don't be, and I'm not saying you, because I know, but to anyone watching, just to, don't be hard on yourself. It's not a race. There really is no destination. And I try to tell people that all the time. There's no mark that you can say, oh, I did it. I've done it. I'm done.
Yeah,
I'm good. I'm constructed. Like, no, this is a lifelong thing. And there are going to be things that come at you that you don't even realize was a trigger.
Oh, yeah.
You're just like, okay, so now we're dealing with this, and I remember.
There's always something to be working on. Yes. You remember.
Yeah, always. I remember I was sexually abused under religion, and I remember I thought I was fine. I thought I was good, and then I had my daughter. Oh, that brought up a whole new layer of trust issues, a whole new layer of deconstructing and reminding myself that it's okay. I don't have to trust who I don't want to trust, right? Because one of the things with the church family is that there is a lot of undue trust given up front. And so it fosters an environment where exploiting, especially children, can come easy. So, I have such a heart for children, and I even tell my clients, like, we have to heal that inner child, that inner indoctrinated child before the adult in us can have a place to really let loose and be free.
Absolutely. And I say on social media sometimes, just because someone calls themselves bishop, apostle, elder, deacon, priest, pastor, enlightened one, whatever it is, that means nothing. And in fact, as soon as they do call themselves that, let your alarm bells be going off, because they are the potential there to abuse people. Because as soon as we suspend our critical thinking and we start believing in things on faith, like miracles or whatever, that's when the charlatans can come in and take full advantage.
Yes.
Because we've suspended our disbelief.
And not just suspended it, right? But handed it over.
Yeah.
We've completely just said, okay, here, I believe in you fully, and people are more exploitative than they like to let on, more opportunistic than they like to let on. And in a lot of scenarios, especially within the church and in religion, if you have the opportunity to do something and you think you'll get away with it, just a lot of people do it. A lot of people take advantage. And I will say this, right? Because I like to put this disclaimer out there. There are people who, like you, like me, we fully lived what we believed, you know, and my mom is even one of those to this day. She lives what she believes. And that is why she and I have a beautiful relationship, because I can respect her for that. It's not that she's trying to hurt anybody or push anybody or anything like that. It's that they're completely, you know, but on the whole, religion, the tactics, the psychological tactics that are used within religion are there to harm, to control, to manipulate. And it's so funny because I talked to Mandisa, and she said, you know, she had an incident where a woman told her she had a slave mentality because she didn't believe in Christ. Oh dear. I was just like, that's a head scratcher.
I bet that didn't go well.
No, Mandisa handled it well, but it's a head scratcher because, you know, the delusion. It's a lack of critical thinking, right? Because we as a people, as a Black people, adopted and appropriated religion from our oppressors as slaves. So to tell someone who doesn't believe that they have a slave mentality, that's a little more counterintuitive, I feel like.
And that feels like such a problem that exists today when, because we have left Christendom and we look at it and go, man, those people are indoctrinated. You know, some would say brainwash. I say indoctrinated.
Yes.
But they look at us and think, oh, those people are so deceived.
Yes.
So how do we do that? How are we able to
reconcile it? Yeah.
Yes, there is such a thing as objective truth. There is knowable truth. But if you're going to suspend your critical thinking, it makes it very hard for us to come together and
yes, exactly. And oh boy, yes. I have been dealing with an influx of, you know, Twitter mafia, and you know, the believers who like to jump on and you know, atheists are this and atheists are that, and it's been interesting, but at the same time, people are like, why won't you talk to them? Why won't you, you know, tell them exactly how you feel? I'm like, listen, I was one of them. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to feel such fire for your God, and to feel like you have to defend at every turn. Any doubters, any non-believers, you have to jump up and you have to say something.
Yeah.
But I also remember that in those moments, I was listening to. And I'm every time I look back and I think, I'm grateful for the people who actually talked to me, who did not believe and were able to plant seeds of critical thinking, because I was not thinking critically.
Right.
I was just kind of going and going and going. And I always, you know, I make the joke about the rock that's too heavy for God to carry, you know, but it really does. It takes something so small to crack that nut. It's like, your blinders are on. You really have to, you know, and so I refuse to argue with people. I'm not a debater. You know, I wish I had like Matt Dillahunty's, you know, resolve and his intellect to debate with people. I don't have that. But I am here for a different purpose, you know, to help people who have experienced religious trauma. And I remember telling someone, I'm like, I actually really do appreciate you bringing all of these believers to my page, because statistically, a few of you are doubting.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. And that is true. And I can totally relate to, I don't have the energy to invest in debating or arguing, especially, I mean, some people are committed to misunderstanding. They just are because of their indoctrination. And I see my job instead as, if you picture a little old church out in the country, and then there's stairs that you have to go down, you leave the front doors and go down the steps to the ground. I'm there at the bottom of the steps, catching the people who are thrown out and who stumble out and who are thinking, who am I now? What do I do now?
Yeah.
And I'm there to say, you're going to be okay. You're not the first. You're not the last to have to grapple with these really big questions. And there's a place for you. There is community of people who don't believe, people who think critically, and people who know what it's like to come out of indoctrination.
Yes. And I'm always grateful for you, because you're probably one of the only other people that I've ran into and met and just, love, who you deal with the identity, right? That's really one of my bigger focuses. And what I do is, because religion it strips us down. It makes us kind of step pretty,
Yeah, absolutely.
Very much, and it tells you in a holy text, especially in our Bible, right? That you got to look the part. They'll know you because you look like mine. You look like me, and I remember, and I've told you, I remember going places and they're like, man, you're holiness, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah, I am. And I felt really good about that. And it wasn't really anything to feel good about, because I wasn't known for Mary. I was known because of something that I belonged to.
You were a great rule follower.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Great rule follower, able to look the part, and, but that is also part of what builds us up to the point where we leave the church or we leave our religion, and then we seek other establishments. I've talked to people, they've got into MLMs and
cult hopping.
Yes. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. And so I wish that there were things like what you do and what I do when we left, to kind of help, like you said, catch those people. Hey, listen, you got it. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out together,
I don't know if you tell your clients about the BITE model, Steve Hassan's BITE model: behavior, information, thoughts, emotion.
It's funny that you mentioned that, though.
Yeah.
I have not been until you posted it.
Okay. Yeah, it's really important. I want everybody to know about it, particularly because those of us who grew up in fundamentalist homes, we are primed for authoritarian groups. And so we may leave the church, but we will jump into yoga cult or MLM or whatever else it is, and we'll follow it as deep as we can, because that's what we were trained to do. So Dr. Hassan's BITE model stands for behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions. And if any person or group is trying to control those BITE aspects of you, it's time to take a step back and take a look at what is going on, because we can't go just by how we feel, because sometimes things are bad for us, but they feel familiar. And so we think, it must be okay. It feels all right. But no, we need to not follow in that same familiar feeling.
Right. Yeah. Familiarity and comfort aren't always a good thing. As a matter of fact, probably more often than not, it's not a good thing. When you're talking about joining some organizations and establishments. And just for a little bit of reference, so the BITE model, when he talks about behavior control, are they controlling how you do things? Anything to do with sex, or anything to do with where you're going?
How you look, how you dress.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, how you dress. Information. Are they kind of skewing the facts? Are they controlling what you watch or what you're allowed?
You can only read Watchtower approved.
Exactly. Yes. And then the technology was the other one.
Thoughts, behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions.
Technology is always a key. Thoughts. How you're not allowed to think this way. You're not allowed to think that way. This is how we think about certain people. This is how we think about this group over here. And so it becomes very collective. And then the emotional. These are the feelings that you should have. And you shouldn't feel this way. You should just go to God, or you should, or you should push that to the side and deny how you feel, or whatever the case may be. So just to give a little bit of context for each level of that BITE model, when I read it and you posted that, I love this. This is amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
I had never
Really
heard
helpful.
of it before, but it is very helpful in identifying some of the more toxic establishments out there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I encourage people to look into it. I'll make sure you have a link for it, and your viewers can go and look at it themselves.
Thank you. And, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's always a pleasure to see your beautiful face. And I really appreciate you taking time to come on and chat with me and to enlighten my listeners and viewers about what you do and where you come from. And I just want to give you the floor, and you can, tell us about any kind of upcoming projects, how people can reach you, what's exciting, what's going on with Divorcing Religion. Let us know.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I have a podcast called the Divorcing Religion Podcast, and it's available everywhere. And I have a YouTube channel called the Conference on Religious Trauma. And I'm posting sessions from the inaugural Conference on Religious Trauma, Court 2021. I'm posting those, of course, free of charge on my YouTube channel, as well as all of my Divorcing Religion podcasts. So I've got the podcast, the YouTube channel. Conference on Religious Trauma is happening online this October 20th to 22nd. And people can go to religionstraumaconference.org. I'm pretty sure that's my website.
That's it.
And then on Twitter, I have a couple of profiles there. Divorce Religion is one. And then the other one is Wise Counselor. And counselor has 2 L's. I am on TikTok as Janice Selbie. I feel like there's probably other places I'm showing up too. Those are the main ones, and a couple of projects I'm working on right now. I'm collaborating with some American colleagues on opening a recovery center in the United States for people who are leaving high demand, coercive religious and spiritual groups. So it might be something as small as a family cult, Christian family cult, might be something as large as Scientology or Unification Church, people who need help. So we're working on that. We're having our first gathering in April to do some strategizing in LA. I'm excited about that. And in Canada, I'm working to try and get humanist marriage officiants to be permitted in British Columbia. That's the province where I live. They are, other provinces allow them, but in BC, you can only get married by a religious person. And we have very few non-religious people, and they have a whole lot of rules around them. You have to be retired and this, that, the other. I want humanism to be recognized, and I want us to be able to officiate at ceremonies, weddings, and funerals. So those are a few of the things that I'm working on right now, as well as my private.
A few.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And people can go to my website, divorcing-religion.com, and they can book one-on-one sessions with me, or we can talk about my workshop, the Divorcing Religion Workshop. Yes.
And we will have links to all of that.
Yay!
All of that. And I am excited about the center that you're opening up, and I hope to see you in April when you come to LA, because that's going to be awesome. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited. I was very happy that you agreed to be on. I didn't think you wouldn't, but I love talking to you, and I love your story, and I think just a lot of people can benefit from hearing it. So thank you, and thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you. This has been a real pleasure. Invite me back. I'll come back anytime.
I will do that. Same. I'd love to be on your podcast again. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Thank you.